Hi, I'm Carrie Ellis, author of 21st Century Superhuman, and this is our 21st Century Superhuman guest show with amazing people doing amazing things on planet Earth today. Today we have with us Peter Moon, who is an author and bringing forth some really interesting material on everything from the math of time travel to interdimensional spaces below the Sphinx in Romania. Peter, welcome to the show today, and I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you, Carrie. It's very nice to be with you.
Awesomely cool. So you are an author, and why don't you go ahead and share with us some of the books that you're author of, because there's such a list. I think you'll be better at sharing it than I will.
Okay, well, because this is a somewhat new audience for me, I should perhaps give an overview and explain. I'm an author, but I'm also a publisher. And I've been in this business since the early 1990s. The first book that I co-authored with Preston B. Nichols and published was the Montauk Project, Experiments in Time. You see this golden horse on the front. And this book is about mind control experiments that took place at Montauk Point, New York, which is at the extreme eastern end of Long Island. It was once the Eastern Shield Defense, and it had the capability to monitor the skies, anything that was going on in the skies, and this radar frequency that it operated at, approximately 435 megahertz, was deemed to be the window frequency to the human consciousness.
So I read that that's one of the reasons you moved to Long Island, was because of that area being there. And you're saying the actual land itself has this frequency, is that correct?
Well, the radar frequency, the radar installation was set up at that frequency. But we could also say that the indigenous energies of the area are also very primed and special.
Right.
So although they have not been studied, at least in the same reference point as the secret projects that were done there. Now, when I say that I moved there for that reason, well, yes and no. I moved there, when I step back and look at the bigger picture of my life, why I moved there, well, it all made sense. Why I moved to Long Island, because this was central staging for sort of the revelation of key mysteries on the planet that I was to take part in. I actually moved there because my wife at the time was from Long Island. We were living in Florida, and we were going to move to either my native Los Angeles or her New York, which was where her parents were. And we decided to move to New York because my parents had been deceased for some time. So we wanted to be close to family, and that's what we did.
Nice.
But
go ahead. Very exciting. I mean, I think everything that you were involved with is just so interesting. So go ahead, tell us more.
Well, yes, the Montauk Project, which all the gritty details and mechanics of it are discussed in this book, although it was a mind control project, in the course of studying mind control, they could open up the mind and develop what you refer to perhaps as a superhuman, although it's a superhuman with a twist. It's not such a good superhuman. It's like the superhuman gone bad, or the superhuman who's adulterated, because they were using aggressive and sadistic sometimes techniques to open up the mind. Now, these are old techniques in the history of mankind, but specifically, they would open up the so-called ESP of an individual, which is really not extra. It's native to the individual. However, as they begin to manipulate these subjects, they would eventually got into areas where they could actually manipulate time itself, manipulate matter, energy, space, and time.
Wow. So and when you say they
is the is a good question. Those who are operating the project.
Okay, great.
Of course, a lot of the project itself and the data trail, the paper trail to it has been shredded. I once met a woman that I knew as a young man she was in naval intelligence. When I told her about this, she says, of course, all that stuff's shredded. She said she knew about the Philadelphia experiment, which was an experiment in 1943 when the Navy tried to make a ship appear invisible to radar. And this was the antecedent of the Montauk Project. They tried to make it appear invisible to radar. It actually went out of this time and space. Now, all of this sounds fantastic. But as we carry forward with this interview, it will be more demonstrable that this stuff is not out of the realms of science. And this is what my most recent work has been on. You will see by the time this video comes out, if not soon thereafter, you will see videos that I'm releasing that are going to be available for free for anyone that explain the math and physics behind time travel. I mean, this is after working in this business for 25 years. Now there's a whole story behind how that, there's a lot of, I guess what you'd say, there's enough cogent explanation of time travel in this original book, The Montauk Project, that it actually turned the world on its ears, the scientific world, as far as having to catch up with the idea of time travel. And there have been a lot of efforts in this regard, but most of them fall short, ultimately.
Peter, I'd love to toss out a question, and maybe you don't have to answer it right away, but kind of include it as one of the things I talk about in 21st Century Superhuman that quantum physics has started telling us is there is really no such thing as time or space as we've understood them. And I'm really curious how that ties in with time travel.
Okay, well, I will answer your question directly.
Okay.
There is such a thing as time and space. Of course, we can go back and say that it's all illusory anyway, you know, like the principle of Maya in the Hindu religion. It's all illusory. However, there is time and space. Now, time and space as we know it, it's our perception of time and space that are, I wouldn't necessarily say wrong. They are faulty, or let's say they do not see all of the picture. The human mind has certain limitations that are inherent on its current condition. Now, the whole idea of the superhuman, which is, you know, what your dialogue is, you know, predicated upon, is not foreign from what I sometimes talk or write about. It is the full expansion of consciousness. So if I addressed your question, we can get deeper into it. But
Yes.
As we move on, but yes, there are limitations on our perception, and this new information that I'm releasing is not really new information. It exists in the textbooks of physics if you are so astute to pick it out and find it. And the problem is people get confused and lost, and they talk a lot about wormholes and quantum physics, which are not necessary to establish that time travel fits within the bounds of ordinary mathematics and physics. The only prerequisite you need to understand what I present, and we can certainly touch upon that in this interview, is the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And if people understand that and the principles for that, it's simple.
I love I think you shared a document with me that you're getting ready to publish soon. And it talked about kind of curving time and space in order to do time travel, which is different than, you know, when I think in my old programmed mind thinks of time travel, I think of, you know, just going to the past or going to the future in a linear way, sort of the way we're used to traveling here in the 3D world. But it seems like the concept you're working with is broader than that. It incorporates kind of a bigger feel and experience of this creation that we live in.
It's simpler. It's simpler, and it's therefore appears to be more clever. But it's not really that it's more clever, it's simple. And the other approaches are awkward and border on the incomprehensible. And therefore, when they're incomprehensible, they cannot be put into practice. Now, the whole idea of putting into practice is a whole nother question we can arrive at and get to. But you mentioned the article. It is published. It was a newsletter, the 2015 summer newsletter that I write called the Montauk Pulse, which is available, issued quarterly. It's available at the website skybooksusa.com. It's $19 annually. And there's 4 issues, one in each solstice and equinox. Now, that particular issue is downloadable for free at my website, my informational website, digitalmontauk.com, MONTAUK, digitalmontauk.com. And you go to the Mathematics of Time on the menu bar, and you can download a PDF of it. So it explains how time travel is within the ordinary bounds of math and physics. Once again, the only prerequisite being that you understand the Pythagorean theorem.
It is a really exciting article. I encourage anybody who's interested in time travel to do that download, and we will have below this video, we'll have those links again so that someone can get them easily. So why don't you go ahead back to the overview of your books?
I'm going to, and interestingly enough, you are one of the few who really twigged on that newsletter. I sent it to you, and you twigged on it like boom. And the only other person who sort of lit up like a light bulb like that is a professor of economics in China, who actually, she's Romanian, and she took me on a couple of my adventures in Romania. But she twigged on it, and she was looking at it from an economic viewpoint, because that's a whole nother story. But it's like this article, which if it came out 20 years ago, it would have turned everybody upside down in terms of the scientific world. The problem is now we've been inundated with information, and you could say anything. You could say something ridiculous as Donald Trump and Bruce Jenner are lovers, and the world would just kind of like, okay, so what? You know, it's almost that we live in a world of absurdity where any sort of information that comes out is discounted just by its own absurdity. However, another reason that this information sort of fell on dead ears is because people, gray matter, are not indoctrinated to look at time any different than they have been looking at it since they grew up.
Right. In my book, I quote Lynn McTaggart from the Intention Experiment, and she tells about a study that happened a number of years ago, and it was 4,000 people who were dying of a fever, and they prayed for 2,000 of the people, and the other 2,000 were the control group. And when they did this prayer, of course, those who they prayed for got well, less of them died. But the really interesting aspect of it was this prayer experiment happened 6 to 10 years after the fever did.
After the what?
After the fever, after this epidemic happened. So the prayer literally happened after the epidemic, but changed the epidemic. So watching your curving time and space concept, or looking at that, I just got really excited about, to bring positive change to the planet. And I can see things happening now that, I believe there's some really great potential there for changing the course of where we're going. But I don't want to get
It's a beautiful idea. It's a very beautiful idea. And the actuality of it is, when you watch all of the trauma, the societal psychopolitics going on right now, that we've been suffering from, since the United States and England got going, the political nonsense that goes on, the political science behind society. And then it's been recently exacerbated in the 1990s with the Waco massacre and the Ruby Ridge shooting, the Oklahoma City bombing, and the suspicious government activity around covering up certain of the information, 9/11, all this stuff has become like the cancer is spreading. Now, the beauty of embracing time as a malleable function of existence is that it gives you the potential, if not the opportunity, to assuage all of this hurt. Now, this idea of assuaging hurt is not unlike the function of religion, or at least the ideals of religion. I shouldn't say the function of religion, I should say the espoused ideals of religion.
Right.
Where to say in a Buddhism, you have basically the idea that man is in a world, or samsara, they call it, of suffering. You are to relieve this suffering. Christianity advocates that if you accept Jesus, you can be free from suffering and have eternal life. These concepts are not new. Their functionality is arguable, questionable, unless you have actually experienced it.
Yeah, I mean, I think buried in all religions are these quantum principles. They're, that were being carried forward in a way that people could understand. And today we're able to interpret these things with science and understand that this really does make sense in a quantum world.
Now I want to go to the next part of the Montauk Project.
Awesome.
Basically put a lot of people on, made the fur fly on their back a little bit, because some people just couldn't, they had cognitive shock, ontological shock. In other words, how could all this be going on and we don't know about it? How could the public be so duped? Well, as I said, as I followed the data trail to try and discover it, most of which had been annihilated, I began to have actual leads of investigation, but they came through the principles of synchronicities and the synchronicities had to do with dark occultism. For example, certain names would appear up, and these are talked about in detail in my second book, Montauk Revisited, Adventures in Synchronicity. Now, so I began to have peculiar name associations.
Let's see that cover, Peter. What's on that cover?
You see it okay? Is it clear?
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Yeah, now this is a picture that was, it's a graphic illustration that was designed by my former wife. She did a very good job. She was a award-winning artist. She still is an award-winning artist, but I mean, she's not my wife anymore. But this is her inspiration. The female represents the goddess, Babylon, which is the gateway. And then you have the flying saucer craft with the wings. That's, represents Horus, the age of Horus. But in any case, the synchronicities that surrounded the theme of the Antichrist, and one particular personage named Aleister Crowley who attempted to personify the Antichrist. So you have this time travel project, which is laden with mind control and Antichrist energy. So, of course, this project is being, when we talk about it's being orchestrated on the deeper levels of negative consciousness that, if it's not the Antichrist itself, the Antichrist is a perfect metaphor for what is being done here. What is being done so as to grasp matter, energy, and space and time, and control and manipulate it to its advantage, which is basically to perpetrate negativity, because that's what the Antichrist does. It perpetrates it is an agent of negativity. If we strip back all the metaphors, the Christian metaphors for the Antichrist, we can just call it good old unwholesome negativity, which you can find in the yin-yang symbol.
And you know, I always like to say that basically for thousands of years, we've had an experiment going on planet Earth of operating basically outside of love, outside of being creator beings of love that we were really designed to be. And so there's been this experiment in moving away from oneness, in moving into duality deeper and deeper and deeper. And so do you feel like you discovered some things through the Montauk Project that are applicable to, you know, good moving forward on the planet?
Oh, tremendously so. But this progression took years to manifest. And yes, very, very much so. In fact, it's downright intriguing as to what happened. And when I look at all of the potpourri that happened in my own life, I had to wade. It's like wading through debris. I once had to wade through the debris of I was talking to you about it before the show, of the star-kissed tuna factory in Los Angeles Harbor. I had to wade through all of their tuna excrement or or discharge, you know, because I was taking a rowboat in the harbor, and I had to go through all this sludge, and it was very disgusting. They don't allow them to do that anymore. They have to clean up their stuff. But this is what doing the Montauk Project was like. And of course, while you're sludging through all this excretia, you see fantastic beacons of light that understandings and whatnot. And I will lead you on that path, because studying all this dark occultism and synchronicities associated with it led me by spontaneity and circumstance to the head of Aleister Crowley's secret society.
Wow.
He was the head of it. They had gotten legal receivership of the society. There was a big court battle, which is a whole nother story, which was, I guess what you'd say, augmented by the presence in the courtroom of the satanic chaplain of the U.S. Army, who psychologically, if not otherwise, helped them secure their court victory to have the successorship of Aleister Crowley's organization, Ordo Templi Orientis. Well, I happened to meet this man, and after talking with him, I began to recognize who he was, and he acknowledged who he was. It's like I had passed the test, although I was never a member of his organization. But he gave me an introduction, and that's the right reason I met him, because I was told he would know how to meet this woman, Marjorie Cameron. Marjorie Cameron was the focal point of what's been termed the greatest magical working of the 20th century, the Babylon working, which featured three characters: Marjorie Cameron herself, L. Ron Hubbard, who was before he was the founder of Scientology, Dianetics and Scientology, and who I ended up working with in the 1970s in his personal office, and Jack Parsons, who was the man who basically made the solid fuel rocket possible. He discovered the solid fuel rocket. And without Jack Parsons, we wouldn't have the space program as we have it today. Wow. So these three characters were deeply involved in magic. And of course, Marjorie Cameron was somebody who I actually got to meet with, and met with her twice, and she was my friend. I talked with her on the phone several times. And her whole role in this was very misunderstood. Her role was, and the role of the Babylon working, although it has been vilified, and there were certainly dark elements to it, which was to bring back the goddess to the planet, to reverse the patriarchy that had been done, that we've been suffering under. When you talk about this non-love aspect of existence, this is the reversal of that. So that was what my second book led me to. You wanted to say something.
You know, it's just amazing. I'm getting chills as you're talking. Just the roots of what has occurred in this modern civilization, where we're these people that are coming forward with brilliance and doing these amazing things, and really implementing new programs. I want to just read a quote really quick because it comes to mind that I took from one of your talks that I was listening to online. The more man evolves in the frontal lobe, the more they dumb down the primordial. And I love it that this woman was working to bring forth the goddess. And, you know, we have this real deep need to recover our connection to the earth and our deeper sense of who we are. But then we are doing these really sophisticated projects. And
well, yes, the primordial aspect of humanity is has been compromised, and when you get into the primordial aspect of humanity, you're dealing with what the Chinese, and before the Chinese, the ancient people of Eastern Europe, Western Asia, called the dragon energies. The dragon energies are both light and dark, light and dark. And this is primordial because this is the symbolic of the spiral of creation, which we see in the DNA and whatnot. But the primordial aspect is something that might be better served later on in this talk. Although, yes, we're dealing with those energies, and you'll see how they formed a pathway into my own life where they become a much more functional exercise in my own consciousness and what I've read.
Very exciting. And I'm curious too, as you're telling this story, how many of the Montauk books are there? And were you ghostwriter for the Montauk books, or did you eventually write them on your own too? And did you notice as you got immersed in all of this that you were getting in touch with deeper aspects of yourself as well?
Well, of course, yes. On the latter, yes, you're getting much in touch with deeper aspects. To answer your question, the first book, the Montauk Project, Experiments in Time, I was strictly a ghostwriter. That's all I was wanted to be. That's all I was meant to be. That's all I was supposed to be. However, from the beginning of that book, there was always an effort, not by my co-author, most certainly, but by others, to minimize my importance, because, and I was always highly amused at this, highly amused, because there would have been no book had it not been for me, because there was a New York Times writer who attempted to take on the subject, and he got quite frightened, and he begged off of it. You know, he perhaps had more of those resources of what you might call a data trail because of his access. And the New York Times was not happy with my book at all, but as a body politic. But however, all of my life training had prepared me to do this book. So I was definitely a piece on the chessboard, whether people realized it or not. Now, the other books, and it's hard to say what is the Montauk series, because there are several books on it, and I will show you probably 6 books you could say arguably proper, and that's not even accurate, because there are other books about it. And certainly there's, let me just carry forward with the core Montauk books, which was Montauk Project and Montauk Revisited. The third book in the series was Pyramids of Montauk. Now, Pyramids of Montauk is very interesting because I discovered through following these name synchronicities, the names significant were Wilson and Cameron. I mentioned Marjorie Cameron was to be she was the focal point of the Babylon working. Well, when I interviewed her and talked to her, she told me that her real name was not Cameron, it was Wilson, and that she was adopted by her uncle, who was a Cameron, And she said, L. Ron Hubbard was really not a Hubbard. He was a Wilson. And his father was a Wilson who was adopted by the Hubbards, and he became a Hubbard. Now, through these name synchronicities of Wilson and Cameron, and they go deeper. I'm not going to go off because that's a whole bizarre trail. But they led me to her, and then the pursuit of these names was sort of rest aside. At the end of the book, when I go to look up the definition of Montauk and where the etymology of the word Montauk came from, and I go to the library, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I saw a book on the history of Long Island by a man named Rufus Wilson. And because the name was Wilson, I picked up the book. And inside the book, I found this picture. It says the pyramids, Montauk. Yet there was no explanation in the entire book of these pyramids. So this began a whole effort to understand these pyramids, how they got there, what they were, and the result was this book. I've since found out more information about those pyramids, but basically what I found out in that visit to the library was that not only did they have pyramids at Montauk, witnessed by the picture, they're no longer there now. I believe that they were blown away in the 1938 hurricane that occurred at Montauk. But they were ancient, and I met a Montauk native or Montauk Indian who told me that her grandfather used to tell her about those pyramids, and they had underground chambers where they would do sort of third eye ceremonies and whatnot. And nobody ever believed her. They thought,
my gosh, that is really exciting.
Yes, and I was actually, and this is interesting because I met her at a Thanksgiving Day dinner held for the Montauk Indians on Long Island, not far from my own house, and I was invited to speak to them. Now, it's very interesting because some Native Americans will recoil at the mention of the word Indian. The Montauk Indians do not mind the word Indian whatsoever. They're always known as the Montauk Indians. It's fine with them. And they also were celebrating Thanksgiving, which some Native Americans, if not most, will go ballistic because Thanksgiving was actually turned into a rout of killing Native Americans. So, but this was the experience. And I had been invited to this gathering by the Montauk shaman. Queen Winona Redbird, her native name, her Christian name would be Sharon Jackson. And she is a reverend in the Christian faith. She's also a shaman. She works both worlds. A very dear lady. And she instantly recognized me, just sort of like you did. She instantly recognized me and says, oh, we're going to do wonderful things together. This was on the phone. She recognizes the spirit. And she's been a very helpful character in my life. And she invited me to talk. And of course, the woman who remembered the pyramids was Gail Evening Star, Gail Boyd. And she is, I haven't talked to her in a long time. She's still a dear friend. Her mother was just an incredible woman who, boy, did she have some things to tell me. I wish she was still alive. Louise Boyd. But in any case, the pyramids, nobody understood her when she saw this book, or saw the book. I don't know if the book had been written at that time. I don't think it had. But she was just, wow, somebody finally knows about those pyramids because I heard about them all my life. So in any case, the family that were the custodians of these pyramids historically were known as the pharaohs. So you will see the pharaoh family in the Montauk genealogy. And the pharaohs, and of course, Sharon told me that she was taught that their tribe came from Egypt. All right. Now this lines
Very
up with a
cool.
lot of other history.
Yep.
We don't have details of the details. We have migrations, we have oral history and whatnot, but there's a certain pattern that you can put together. Sort of like when they take a dinosaur and put his body back together from bones, they can, you know, figure out that this looked this way and this looked that way. That's sort of what we have to work here. And I've done some very interesting work with particular help. And not, I don't know this man, but if you see his YouTube lectures or his books, his name is Alan Wilson, who he knows some of the history of the ancient Brits and King Arthur and Prince Modoc, who came from, most likely had an Egyptian ancestry and came to America.
Interesting. I'm just getting chills as you're talking. So this, I love these pieces you just added in. And the part you were just talking about the Montauk Indians or the Indians in that area, is in this Montauk book that you're talking about right now?
Well, I write about this in the Pyramids of Montauk.
The Pyramids of Montauk.
Okay, now the actual land where the experiments took place, the Montauk Project experiments took place, they definitely took place in this location called Camp Hero, which is an Air Force station, or was an Air Force station. And the deeds to this area are very questionable. But this area was sacred to the Native Americans. It was particularly sacred. Now, so you have the secret government coming in and taking this secret area. But you find out that the white people on Long Island were always trying to get their hands on this property, on all of Montauk. And that when you go to study, and there were court cases between the Montauk Indians and the adversaries of them who were trying to steal their land, and did effectively acquire the land, possession of it. I don't know, they don't really have legal ownership of it, but they sort of use it through sleight of hand and mirrors to get this property. So in this book, I describe, I'm actually driving to the county records in Suffolk County to find out who owns this property. And when I get to the parking lot, I'm driving at that time a 1987 black Ford Mustang. That's the car I drive. And when I drive into the parking lot, there's a woman in a black Mustang, exactly like mine, exactly the same year, and her license plate says 666 on it. And I'm getting out of the car and she's getting out of the car, and I think, well, I should talk to that woman. But I don't, I said, she's gonna think I'm nuts, or she's gonna respond with this number too well. I'm not, I declined, but that's the synchronicity, because here you got the 666. When I'm going to look up the deed, okay, the deed, I then go and look up the deed, and I find in the folder for the area that's known as Camp Hero, because they put it all into lines of latitude and longitude and whatnot and break it down into maps. It is a quitclaim deed. It is not a real deed. It is a quitclaim deed from the United States government, ceding it to their rights to this property to New York State, and where it's to be used as a park. And New York State will really be sort of a custodian of the property. The way the deed is very cleverly worded, and it says that the government still has rights to the underground, meaning the mining rights. And you know, if New York State does not behave properly, they can take it back. Now, at that time, there were these strange, now the New York State was occupying the property, the Camp Hero, and if you went there to investigate, there was a fenced area, and they would not only escort you off the property, they would do it with great vitriol. And they would do it as if like, what the hell are you doing here? And they would go ballistic. What? It's just a park. Now, there was areas close, and this area that was fenced in, I termed the forbidden zone for our colloquial term for the investigations that we did, Preston Nichols and I and others that might be involved. So what happened is that Preston, one day, I was not with him at the time, he was videoing the entire base, and he put together a couple of VHS tapes, Montauk Tour 1 and Montauk Tour 2, that are on VHS that show the actual base as it existed when we were discovering it. It's changed now. They've had to do cleanup on it and whatnot because there was all this toxicity involved. So in any case, what happened was he was videotaping the base one day with the lead psychic in the project, who had been in the project, Duncan Cameron, and another man, and they were given the heavy-handed treatment by the park ranger. Preston had his videotape running at the time, although he couldn't put it on him. You could get the audio. And then they were cited. They were given tickets, and there was a hearing. And at the hearing, which was East Hampton Town Court, there was this. They wanted everybody out of the courtroom. They saved that for the docket was to be last. They wanted everybody out of the courtroom. Now, I had a friend who was attending it for me because I couldn't be there that day. His name was Mike Nichols, no relation to Preston Nichols. And he says, I'm not leaving. You can't make me leave. This is the people's court. And they left him alone. And he watched. We had a witness.
Brilliant.
Yes. In any case, I actually bought the transcripts. They were expensive. They were over $300. I paid for the transcripts because this was like a big deal at the time. And the judge, the transcripts were highly comical with Preston acting like Perry Mason. It was funny. He actually did a good job of defending himself. But the judge sympathized with Preston because he says, look it. He says, I walk out in that area with my dogs. My dog, he says, how do I know? It's not labeled properly. You don't have all the labeling properly. So the long and short of this was that Preston won the case. He did not have to pay the ticket. And New York State was suggested they get their act together with signs and whatnot. And you had some pretty aggressive testimony against Preston. Now, what happened was, the long and short of it was that State Parks Director of New York State, I don't remember the title. Her name is more famous than her title, Bernadette Castro, from the famous Castro Convertibles family. She was a close ally of George Pataki. And she actually ordered these tapes. She bought them from our company, Sky Books, and they did a whole cleanup of Camp Hero. And part of the problem was that they were, for it to remain a state park, more than at least two-thirds of the property has to be available to the public. They only had about 1/3 of the property available to the public. So they had to clean up their act. And this book actually made New York State change its whole relationship with Camp Hero.
Wow. Let me ask you a couple questions, because your knowledge, Peter, is so detailed, and you have all this complex, detailed knowledge about all this. If we can just pull back a little bit and kind of get into a little more of an overview of it. Is it a state park now? I'm curious.
It is a state park.
And I just wanted to talk, so anybody can go there and experience.
Yes, and there's a very humorous aspect to this, and it's important that I stated this stuff too, because you can go there and you can go to Camp Hero and you will see picnic tables galore. You will see more picnic. You'll never see people. I've one time seen people eating a picnic there. It's not a place you want to go for a picnic. Montauk is a beautiful beach. it's also got a beautiful picnic area. You don't want to go into this old base and eat a sandwich. You just don't want to do it. So it's almost, it's highly comical that, and there's probably stuff that still goes on there. Although, but anyway, you were going to ask something.
So does it have a lot of, does it have an energetic when you go there that's feels different from other places?
Oh, for sure. And
basically, they've been doing time travel experiments there, right?
Well, that's where they did them, and there's always a residual. Yeah. I knew a couple of women that used to come to meetings we used to have on Long Island, and they actually had missing time. They went to Camp Hero. They left their park at a Little League field where there was a Little League game. And like 10 minutes later, they came back and everybody was gone and their cars were locked in.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this type of stuff. So it's, and Preston told me in the beginning, he says, never go out there alone. Do not go out there alone. Take a sensitive with you.
Interesting. So I just wanted to toss in too, when you said you had the 87 black Mustang, and then here was a lady with the black Mustang and the license plate. We teach Jedi training, 21st century superhuman Jedi training. It's one of the workshops that I teach with my book. And I have someone who teaches it with me, who's a very awake star being kind of person, and teaches us how to re-access our Jedi skills. But we always say, when we see a synchronicity like that, we're getting confirmation basically from this matrix we live in that says we're shifting the matrix by the action that we're taking. And so we get these synchronistic alignments that happen that are giving us feedback from the hologram or the matrix that says, oh my gosh, you're shifting the energy. So I love that story. It's really great.
We're communicating in synchronicity with a picture, or what's the word here, with a paradigm, with that which is outside the paradigm.
Yes.
Outside the normal paradigm. And you're creating, when synchronicity can occur any time of the day, but let's say if you go in the phone book and you find 10 people on a page named John, that's not so odd. If you found 10 people in an American phone book that were named Igor, that would be odd, unless it was a Russian district or a Russian district. But there are certain names like Ezekiel. You're just not going to find 10 Ezekiels. So when you find something that occurs that is outside of the ordinary stream of experience,
right,
it's called a meaningful coincidence.
Yep.
When you have a meaningful coincidence, that means you have an outside force influence here, and you're picking up, what you're actually picking up is on the creational energies.
Yes.
What makes reality reality. And because Montauk Project was playing with these energies, of course, when you approach it, you're dealing with the realm of quantum affinity and quantum resonance. So it's not really that mysterious. And as you get experience with it, you see, wow, what can I find out from this? Now, one of the reasons I mention the details here is because people, a certain consensus out there, obviously not my fan base, is very, I guess what you'd say, myopic and negative when my name or my work is brought up, and they haven't read my work, you see. They haven't actually even heard what I just told you, because there has been detailed expositions of certain facts which corroborate that the Montauk Project did in fact happen in some way, form, or another. Now there's some information associated with it that is spurious, questionable. Sometimes it's true. But I always write from a core position of, what are the facts and what do they mean? Now, the relationship that I formed with the Montauk shaman was, and to some extent with the tribe, have been very important for what was to come forth, and some of the things you were asking about to bring out the positive. Yeah. Now, there is a realm, like say in this Now, when that book, the Montauk, Pyramids of Montauk, was written, it's very important to say that I exposed that one of the most flagrant cases of injustice in Native American history occurred over the Montauk Indians. And it was a court case by New York State. It was not done by the federal government, that declared the Montauk Indians extinct, despite the fact that they had a whole bunch of Montauks there. Their genealogy is more extensive in terms of written history than any tribe.
Wow.
Now, and in fact, if you are a displaced tribe, you have to prove that you're related to the Montauks to prove that you're a Native American. You have to use their genealogy, yet at the same time, the genealogy for the Montauks does not afford them to be recognized as a tribe.
Interesting.
So this was all a sleight of hand. Now, one of the reasons that the judge cited, and his name was Abel Blackmar. The name Blackmar is very significant in terms of synchronicity when you hear what I'm about to say. It's marring blacks, because he said that too many of the natives, or the alleged natives, were Negroes, were blacks. And he was basically saying they couldn't be Indians if they were black. Now, he had a fixed idea on what an Indian was, because there were blue-eyed, blonde-haired Indians, called the Mandan Indian. There were, Indians is not a designation. There is a history perpetrated on Americans when you're in school that Native Americans are this sort of Siberian thread of genetics that looked like, depictions of Geronimo in Western movies. And Native Americans are far more extensive than that, and many of them had black skins. And the black skins are black people were recognized by the Chinese scientists as being in China before the Asian people, the Asian race. So this is a whole mystery of melanated peoples that I was to discover later on. Now, to give you a very quick overview, and it's best we not digress, this book on the Pyramids of Montauk was followed by a book called Encounter in the Pleiades, an inside look at UFOs, which is the history of Preston Nichols' experiences, whether they be contact, abduction, and having been taken to the Pleiades, at which time he gets this advanced scientific knowledge. So he comes back with a scientific knowledge. He was always good with science. And his classmates...
Tell us again, too, really quickly, the site where people can find your books, because these are really exciting books.
Okay, they can purchase them on Amazon, on Kindle, in ebook form, or they can purchase them on Amazon in hardback form, or they can go to skybooksusa.com and purchase them there. So they're very available. But this particular, Preston Nichols' father told me that indeed, Preston, all of a sudden, overnight, his scientific acumen and technological acumen went up, boom. So what happened?
Tell us again, who is Preston Nichols?
Preston Nichols is my co-author and the one who is responsible for gathering the information that we know as the Montauk Project, having interviewed people for trying to figure out his own weird life. He's a scientist. He's one of the foremost experts in electromagnetics in the world. He still is that. He's still living. He's no longer on Long Island. He's in a place... You
also have very interesting light around you when you watch this later. I'll just tell you that throughout this video.
Well, you're giving me a chance to express things in a context that doesn't normally come out in this way. So, but anyway, we wrote this book to talk about his experiences, and it's a part of his life that most people didn't know about at the time.
And go ahead and show us that book cover again, because it's really an exciting title.
Well, yes, Encounter in the Pleiades, an inside look at UFOs.
Very cool.
Now, I also detail some of my history in the second part of the book. Now, there's another book, before we get back to the Montauk series, and all of these could be considered part of the Montauk series, but they're really not, because they don't talk too much about Montauk per se. Now, this book is another part of Preston Nichols' biography. It's called The Music of Time. So we find out that Preston Nichols, of course, I knew this from working with him, but he was a recording sound engineer for some of the top record acts that those of us who are alive in the 60s and 70s listened to. He was also a close personal childhood friend of Mark Hamill, the actor who was Luke Skywalker.
Interesting.
Mark
Beautiful art on that cover too.
Yes, this is done by a woman named Ariel Phoenix. But Preston or Mark Hamill was a writer and performer of much of the music, the bubblegum music you heard from the 60s. Yet if you look at his bio, you won't see it. You'll see he has a whole secret history with Montauk. His father was in naval intelligence, and according to some accounts, he was also in Army intelligence and was both.
Wow.
There was a man named Hamill, and possibly his father, who helped recover all the paperclip scientists, the Nazi paperclip scientists. Now, I met a woman who was a friend of mine, and she was a school teacher in Long Island, and Mark Hamill was her pupil. She says, oh yes, he was always staying, he's great. He was failing school because he'd be out late playing music for bands and whatnot. And his father came in and talked to us because he wanted this kid to stay in school. He was failing because he was tired, because he'd be up doing music all night. He wasn't dumb. And he used to say funny things, like he'd sit there in class and go, my father's in the CIA. My father's in the CIA.
Wow.
So there's a whole history that Mark never talks about. And if you look at his bio, you won't see any music. You won't see any music background, except you'll see that he played the role of Mozart in the stage musical or stage play Amadeus, before it was a movie.
Wow.
Now, he didn't want to be in the movie. He could have been in the movie. And in the movie, David Hulse, the guy who played Mozart, he had to get personal conducting sessions from the conductor at the Met. And he was for those who understand conducting, and I don't, but I mean, expert people who understand this have told me he was an imbecile in terms of conducting in that. But Mark Hamill was not. And Mark Hamill had a brother, a mysterious brother named Chuck Hamill. And you will see Chuck Hamill finally surfaces in some sort of tangible history in right up by Stephen Greer.
Interesting.
And
I will say, Peter, one of the things that I know, and I really say all the time, because I'm out talking to people and teaching workshops, is there's many of us on the planet right now who are not accidental tourists here, who are here to play certain roles in this change that's taking place. And it sounds like this is the kind of story that you're telling, the kind of, threads you've been able to tie together. Who's carrying this lineage? Who's carrying this information? How did they get this information? How did they become aligned with this lineage? And very exciting. I'm just getting chills as you talk.
Well, in other words, I'm just saying is that Preston had an involvement in the music industry, which some people will get angry about and dispute. Well, he couldn't be there. He didn't do the Beatles records because his name's not on the cover. Well, it was Alan Parsons who was the engineer. Well, he will tell you that he worked with Alan Parsons. And he will also tell you that he didn't want his name on the records because when he did the Four Seasons recording, he saw what happened to Frankie Valli, and people, the groupies and whatnot, and he would have no privacy. Now, he recorded with all these famous groups, from the Beach Boys to the Beatles, and was putting in, Phil Spector was putting in Mind Control. But the first record he ever did was for Time Records called I've Had It. And it was the Time Records. So it was kind of that synchronicity of Time Records. Now, all these names. Now, so I one time asked his father, I said, heard, I mean, I don't know what you know. You've seen this book because he read the early manuscript, and I said, you ever see any evidence that Preston was involved with any of these characters? And he goes, well, he says, one time I came home and I saw the Beach Boys in my living room. I saw the Beach Boys. And yeah, Preston says, yeah, they were here to get an amplifier. They needed an amplifier. Now, Preston Nichols was the god of sound engineering. So anybody would come to him for this equipment. And he told the story different. He said that the Beach Boys were in his backyard. They were testing it out, and the whole neighborhood came around and listened to it, which may indeed have happened. So yes, and the funny thing about the Beach Boys, when I heard this from his father, I went back to him, the father, I said, well, it's very funny that you mentioned the Beach Boys, because you know what their last name was? He goes, what? I go, Wilson. They were Wilsons.
So where does this go, this Wilson name? And tell me the name of this book again that we're just brought up, this music.
The Music of Time.
Music of Time. And so what does that title mean? I'm kind of getting some really interesting.
Well, is that music parlays into time, and Preston would sometimes bring CDs to our monthly meetings that we used to have here, and he'd demonstrate how certain songs were done to affect time travel. One of them was the song Sky High, Jigsaw, and you'd put your hand over the boombox and it would have an energy that you could feel. No other song would have it. Another song was Beach Baby, and a song called Shannon. There might have been some other songs, but these were very peculiar songs in that they would have an electromagnetic signature that you could feel. And he said they were time associated. So music is a function of time, and it can parlay into it. That is a whole, and we had evenings when Preston would play all the music he did and whatnot. Now, so Preston had his hands into the music industry, into the radio industry. And one of the funny synchronicities that occurred in my own life is that Chuck Hamill's old girlfriend contacted me and said, yeah, I know this guy. He disappeared. His name was Chuck Troy. He was really weird. But yeah, he was my boyfriend for a while. So she came up with her sister and another lady, and they spent the night at my house, 1 or 2 nights, and we all went out to Montauk together with Preston. That was the last trip I ever took out to Montauk with Preston, because he moved. But we're out there, and he says to the ladies, he says, yeah, you want to hear this Montauk music? And he says, listen to this radio station. And it was playing all of this, which we knew to be Montauk music from the evening lectures. I said, how did you know they were going to play all that stuff? He says, you know, I called up the radio station, you know, which he said he owned part of, and they played all these songs. But we listened to that on the way out to Montauk. But there's a lot of verification in the details. It's always ephemeral and enigmatic, though. But that's sort of a sidelight of the bizarre history of Preston Nichols, who was wrapped around phenomena up to his neck and beyond.
So, Peter, I would love for us to actually get to Romania. We haven't even really looked at all the Montauk books yet, have we?
No, but I can see what happens is all of this is so deep.
Right.
And I will get, and you had asked, we'll get to Romania, and it all ties together.
Yeah.
When we talk about the Montauk, the positive side, I was involved with peripheral characters to this story, and all or some of which were intriguing in and of themselves. But one was a man I refer to as Ken Arthur, who one time was very psychic, very gifted, and I want to say somewhat afflicted. by this phenomena. But anyway, one time he handed me a frame, and it was a frame that said in it, it was a playbill. It was framed playbill. It said the New Montauk Theater on the top, and it listed a play, and the play was about, well, it was about Kaiser Wilhelm, who was involved with the Nazi connection to Montauk. There was, I'll show it here. It says The Follies of 1909. This was the Ziegfeld Follies, and it featured Kaiser Wilhelm, Teddy Roosevelt, and William Howard Taft. One of the plays. Can't see it too well, but it says, and it says starring Eva Tanguay. Now, at the time I saw this, the name Eva Tanguay went in one ear and out the other. It was of no significance to me whatsoever. I was interested in the content and why was Ken handing me this, and I looked up the history. Kaiser Wilhelm was hard to find out his occult history. He built tunnels out at Montauk in the Pan-Germanian movement. And he was, but anyway, I couldn't get in.
And we know the Nazis were involved in time travel, inner Earth, and a lot of different.
Well, yes, that's a whole nother book, which I don't have here to show you, The Black Sun. It's the Montauk's Nazi-Tibetan connection.
Wow.
But we're not going to go off on that.
No.
Because, but there was a big,
maybe next time.
Big Nazi connection in Long Island. They had the biggest enclave of Nazis outside of Germany in Long Island.
Right.
In Yaphank, and that's where now Brookhaven Labs is now.
Interesting.
So it's all there. One just has to, it's like, as they say, putting a dinosaur's skin back together.
Right.
But what's particularly significant about this document is that I could find nothing. I studied it, I put it aside, and then one day, the main psychic of the Montauk Project, Duncan Cameron, was at my house. He was having lunch, and I said, oh, by the way, I asked him some question, innocuous question about who his favorite politician was. And he says, well, who's yours? And I said, well, it would probably be Teddy Roosevelt, only because he got shot during the speech and got up and finished the speech. That's the only reason. He said, that's really something.
Wow, I didn't know that story.
Oh, yeah, he was shot, and after he finished, I think he shortened the speech from 45 minutes to 20 minutes, and then he took him to the hospital, and they took out the bullet.
Mm.
And anyway, I said, oh, by the way, I've got this, something I want you to give me a psychic read at. So I go up, this had been sitting on my desk under a bunch of papers. I went and brought it down, and he didn't have to give me a psychic read on it. Because when I gave it to him, the back of the cardboard on the framing opened up. And lo and behold, I said, there's something underneath this. And there were a picture, if you can see it, of Jesus. It's a color picture. It's black and white here. Jesus on Mount Olive.
Wow.
And then when I adjusted it again, there's two pictures of Jesus on Mount Olive.
Interesting.
Now, I said, what on earth is this? What does olive mean? So I went into all of these synchronicities trying to figure out, what does the olive mean? What does olive mean? And my friend who gave it to me, he knew all about olives, but he wouldn't tell me. He says, you got to see what an olive tree looks like. So I had to go to the library and find an olive tree. And basically said it's a gateway to the inner earth because, you can hide stuff in there. But the olive is sacred to all religions, at least the Western religions. Greece, there was an olive tree on Mount Olympus. The Jews used olive oil for the Hanukkah miracle, which it would burn. One day's worth of oil would burn for 8 days. Pardon?
I'm getting chills again.
Well, yes, the Christians used olive oil for the chrism. Now, the olive will take us directly to Romania as we begin a back door or a front door to Romania. Nice. There's another door to Romania. But the olive, so anyway, I learned in my researching for Olive, as I was sitting there, I sent a copy of the Pyramids of Montauk to the matriarch of the Montauk tribe. Now, her name was Olive Farrell. And I didn't realize, I wasn't thinking her name was Olive Farrell when I sent her the book. Because, and I called, I was sitting there studying my Olive research. I go to the phone and I say, you know what, I should see if she got the book. I pick up the phone and her sister Carolyn answers the phone. And I said, I want to know if, I want to speak to Olive. She says, she's not here. I wanted to know if my book got there. She says, oh, the book came in. The book came in today. But she, at the same, you know, she just left to the hospital with a bleeding gallbladder. Olive Farrell died.
Wow.
And it was synchronous with my book arriving. And then I went back to the papers I was reading, and it said that the olive oil heals the gallbladder. And that it would be used in the future to heal the gallbladder as well. And it's an ancient Atlantean cure. And I go, oh my God, her name is Olive. And then I said, oh, Olive Farrell. She was the recognized matriarch of the Montauk.
You know, it's making me wonder if there's an entrance to Inner Earth there. Because when you talk about Inner Earth or Agartha, I mean, and I think Inner Earth and Agartha may be two separate civilizations, but Agartha is known to be where some Atlanteans went and really advanced knowledge and advanced civilization.
Well, there is an entrance, if there is an entrance, but Montauk is built upon a mountain. Long Island is a sandbar, but Montauk is separate. It's an island. Now, what's very interesting, it would take me years to put this together. But I had a psychic I used to work with. She's still a close friend, Yonda Ashley. And Yonda was a very remarkable character who was, I was advised to work with at the beginning of this whole journey because I was told by Preston to work with a psychic. Well, one of her friends referred me to her. I knew who she was, but she at the time had a boyfriend who was going to write the Montauk Project, but he got scared. So I ended up writing it. And she had to stay away from me because her boyfriend was too paranoid about her being involved with any of this stuff. Years later, she was surprised that I survived it all, and we became very close friends. And one day she was coming over to my house, and I had lost this playbill, and I was very angry because where's this playbill? I can't find it. I want to put it in a book. Well, as I'm waiting for her, I'm straightening up the house, the coffee table and whatnot. And lo and behold, I see it. It's as if the thing has miraculously appeared. I said, and when I looked at it, I noticed the name Eva Tanguay again. I go, well, now we have internet now. I can go down, who the hell is Eva Tanguay anyway? I went down on the internet and found out that Eva Tanguay was not only the most highly paid vaudeville performer in history, she was a priestess of Aleister Crowley.
Wow.
That means a sexual priestess.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so here I have in this playbill, Aleister Crowley's priestess. I have Jesus, double Jesus inside. And I go, wow, this thing, I call it a quantum relic. I call this thing a quantum relic.
Yeah.
Now, I also learned that the giver of mankind of the olive in Greek mythology was Athena. She beat out a contest with Poseidon or Neptune for who gave mankind the horse, just like the Montauk horse. Well, the olive tree won. The olive was the unanimous winner.
Interesting.
But Athena actually came, and there's a whole side research to this, through an ancient Atlantean queen named Antonia. Antonia was blue, she was Rh negative, and she gave mankind the olive, and her name was transmogrified by the Greeks into Athena, and she was ancestor of the blue people of the Sahara, known as
wow. I'm getting total chills. What's her name again?
Antinea.
Antinea. Oh my God.
Antinea. And the Tuaregs recognize her, and they have blue skin because of the indigo dye they put in their robes. And the Tuaregs are more important here because they're a matriarchal society. They are sometimes called the last matriarchal society on Earth.
And where are they?
They are in the Sahara.
In the Sahara. That's what I was thinking.
You will find them sometimes in Mali and Timbuktu.
Right.
Their core is the central part of the Sahara. And this is in the book, the Montauk Book of the Living.
Wow.
Now, the Montauk Book of the Living. Now, the Montauk Book of the Living, and here's the blue artist rendition, Jill Bauman of the Blue Queen. Now, what was very peculiar about all this book is that I was getting dreams, persistent dreams of an area in California where my parents were died and buried. And this is near Ventura, California. It's an area called Montalvo, and there's a cemetery there, a pretty big cemetery. Now, when I went, I was getting dreams of this area, and the dreams were of this area, the spin-off of California Street in Ventura, which is a really sort of a circular off-ramp or on-ramp. But in the dreams, this off-ramp was just cascading, circular, exotic. There were palm trees. The area was just being amplified. It doesn't look that nice. It's a pretty area, but it doesn't look like this. It kept happening. It took me years to figure out why. In I think it was 99, I'm on vacation. I'm taking my daughter, and we're staying in the town of Camarillo, where my sister lives in California. It's about 80 miles north of Los Angeles. Not quite that much, but anyway, I'm driving to see a friend of mine in Santa Barbara. It's raining. My daughter's in the back seat, and as I go by the area, I remember the exact turnoff we took in the limousine when my parents were buried. And they both died in a car crash when I was 21 in 1974.
Wow.
They both died. And then I see this sign by the turnoff. It says, Los Olivos Adobe, the olives, Los Olivos. I go, what the hell is this? And I begin to tear in my eyes. I go, the olives? What the hell is this?
Interesting.
So I go up to Santa Barbara for the day, see my old friend from school, and drive back down at night. And I asked my sister, I said, what is this about the olives? I tell her about it. And she says, oh, the Olivos were the biggest ranchero in California, the Olivos family. And she says their property is where mom and dad were killed. And it's also where they were buried.
Wow.
Now, it would not...
I'm getting total chills.
The Rancho Los Adobe, Olivos Adobe is now a shortened area of what was the ranchero.
Right.
And you can go there. It's a historical site. And, of course, I made it my business to visit there.
Yeah.
And then the dreams kept coming of this area, and they wouldn't quit. I said, well, what is this? Then I started to dream of an area where I went to high school and entered the mission of Scientology in Davis, California. I went to high school in Davis, California, which is about a 10-minute drive west of Sacramento. It's a little over an hour away from San Francisco. And I would, and then I kept dreaming, and I said, oh, then I realized that mission was on a street, the original street of Davis, California, where there's now a huge university, not on this street. This is the only old street in the town. It's called Olive Drive. But Olive Drive was significant because I had my first out-of-body experiences there. and a full-blown out-of-body experience.
I just want to toss this out because I believe when my dad passed at about 60, he exited this planet. And I have a picture of him holding me when I'm about a year old, and there's literally a flying saucer in front of us. And I believe when Roswell happened and the UFOs were shot down at Roswell, that after we lit off the bomb in World War II, that the ETs or the other dimensional beings, whatever we call them, our galactic brethren said, hey, you know, they're going the wrong direction. We're going to seed this place. And I think there's a lot of people who came in, and I think my dad was somebody who came to open a gateway for me to come in. And I think, I don't know, I'm just tossing in my imprint, you know, on your story here, which may be a...
If you had said that to Marjorie Cameron, I can't speak for her, but she would have thought of you, I think, as one of her moon children that did it in with the Babylon working. Because, you know, in other words, there was a gateway that was open. And when she, I told her, I told the head of the OTO that he said, I told him that I thought there might be something to that idea because I'd heard about it. He mentioned that she thought this. And when she heard that I thought that, she said, that was the gateway that let you in. When you said that,
I think so too. And
let me in to see her. No, not to see her, because she did not like former Scientologists coming to see her. Did not like reporters coming to see her because they always want an exclusive.
And who was she again?
Marjorie Cameron was the focal point of the Babylon working. She was the wife of Jack Parsons. She was a magical colleague of L. Ron Hubbard.
Interesting.
A very important lady.
Interesting.
And well, we could do a whole show on her. But anyway.
Well, you know, but that's so exciting because I get that. You telling all these synchronicities about your life, your parents leaving when you were 21, they came to open a gateway for you to get in, and then they were out of here. And I mean, to my dad, life here in World War II was just about unbearable, what humanity was doing. And he was a really amazing person. But I know, I mean, and then your story about the olive grove and the road where you had your first out-of-body experience. I mean,
we'll get to Romania. But
I'm excited.
Let me just say that because I had these out-of-body experiences connected to the olive, and this book was already about the olive, this book was to be called, originally, the Montauk Book of the Living was to be called the Montauk Book of the Dead because it surrounded around the death of my parents. You see, that was the focal point.
So is this a fiction or a
This is not completely nonfiction.
Completely nonfiction.
Completely nonfiction, this book. And I had, their death was the circumstances surrounding it was like, wow, all of this was tying together. But I realized that I couldn't have put any of it together had I not had the experiences I had with the out-of-body experiences and with Scientology. So then I changed. I was going to have to write the Montauk Book of the Dead, which was to explain my life story and how I got involved in all of this. Now, this book tells my history, much of which is in Scientology, much of which surrounds L. Ron Hubbard. Now, this book, if you will not find this book hardly ever commented upon. There's a whole slew of books by ex-Scientologists that are all very, I guess, negative in what they have to say. This book was never marketed to them. It's not intended for them, although some Scientologists and ex-Scientologists have certainly read it. But it's not about Scientology. It is about Scientology, but it's about to explain how I got involved in all of this work and became a close associate of L. Ron Hubbard's and was able to survive all that because it wasn't an easy environment to survive looking back on it. But I wrote this was too big to be one book. You know, people aren't going to read a book this thick. So it became two books. And that's the story. That's sort of where the Montauk books sort of end.
You know, it's fascinating too, and I would love to see more people reading your books because I think people who are looking for clues as to why they have mysterious things going on in their lives, or why they have these senses about what's going on right now in history. They're going to get a lot of information, I think, from reading those books.
This book is very, these books are generally helpful to someone like yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It helps you, and you get it on a mind, body, spirit level.
Right.
I have heard, scientists have read my book, Montauk Revisited, because, in other words, they can't ignore it, yet they're going, oh, I don't get it. She's putting this together and it together. And they don't understand, even in science, there's two types of brain function. One is linear and one is nonlinear.
Right, exactly.
So some of them, although there's a whole scientific study of nonlinear, many of these scientists are too limited in their exposure to science to understand that science is not all linear and logical.
And neither is time travel.
No.
So, so let's just say again, your books are available. People can look up Peter Moon on Amazon and
SkyBooksUSA.com. Available
SkyBooksUSA.com.
Many bookstores. We've been circulating to bookstores for 20 years.
Okay, great. And there's 6 Montauk books. Is that correct?
Well, I think, yes, there's another book called Montauk, the Alien Connection, which is edited by me, but not by me. That's by Stuart Swerdlow, an experiencer at Montauk. There is, they'll see all the books on my website. And they can descriptions of them. So, yes. Now,
leaping across to Romania, is that possible? Or
yes. At the end of the book, Montauk Book of the Living, I mentioned that, well, another interesting synchronicity about the Mount of Olives is that was the favorite spot of Jesus in the Bible, and that also where the end of the world, there will be a chasm between the Mount of Olives and Solomon's Temple, and that this would be sort of the final end days.
Interesting.
But there is a church chapel on the Mount of Olives where Jesus, you'll see a footprint of Jesus where he ascended to heaven. He ascended to heaven in the Bible from the Mount of Olives.
Interesting.
Now, there might be 2 churches which claim this. I have not been to the Mount of Olives, and it's someplace I'd like to go to someday. But it was also a site of great death and destruction, where Solomon created a temple to Moloch, a name that can be transfigured into Montauk. But in any case, there was a battle over the ownership rights to this chapel on the Mount of Olives, where Jesus ascended from. And the battle, the Russian Orthodox Church had the keys to it, so to speak. And the French and the English wanted the keys to the church. Why, I'm not sure. But they used it as a pretense to engage in what we know now as the Crimean War. Now, the Crimean War is important for many reasons. One of the things it gave us was, I think, Florence Nightingale. She was the nurse that came in and helped people. We've heard of Florence Nightingale. And the charge of the Light Brigade. But what the Crimean War did was establish the current boundaries of the country we know today as Romania. Over a fight in the Church of the Mount of Olives.
And what time frame was this?
The Crimean War is in the mid to late 1800s, around 1870s, I think, 1850s, 1870s. But in any case, there was the Revolution of 1849, which was a whole Masonic revolution, Masonically or Jesuitly, all these groups were.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And this started the Communist Revolution around that time. And what they did in Romania was they changed the language. altered the language, couldn't completely change it. And in 1870, they changed the alphabet, the Romanian alphabet. They changed it from Cyrillic to Latin. And they began to perpetrate this idea that the Romanian language came from Latin instead of the other way around. And like, I've learned this from my trips to Romania. Now that's where the...
So is the Romanian language different than the other Slavic or...
It's not a Slavic language.
Okay.
It's classified as a Latin language, but as you get deeper into the books that I've published on Romania and contributed to, this one, The Secret Parchment, which is the 4th book in the Transylvania series, will show you how Romanian...
Go ahead and hold that up, Peter.
Romanian is the indigenous, is the, what do you call it, the Indo-European, the original Indo-European language. And this will give a scholarly argument for it. And a very good argument.
What's the subtitle of that?
The Secret Parchment.
The Secret Parchment. You know, I've been really involved with the ancient Aramaic, which actually is a quantum physics language that really, they say Arabic, Hebrew, Sanskrit, Persian, and Lakota all came from the Aramaic. And I'm wondering if there's roots in that.
Yeah, you'll see the foundation. And Aramaic, by the way, is Tibetan language.
Uh-huh.
Very similar to Aramaic.
Mm-hmm. And
but more foundational to Aramaic is Romanian. The archaic, we can call it archaic Dacian.
God, I'm getting chills.
And
so
this is
interesting. So Romanian, you're saying they came in and basically corrupted it with Latin, but originally it was one of the...
Well,
really...
you see, the thing is, the Roman soldiers, the Roman soldiers that were retired in Romania or came to Romania when they invaded it, you can't change a language in hundreds of years. It doesn't change that way.
Right.
Romanian is Romanian. And this is a whole side story that we could do a whole nother show on.
Yeah.
But it's the whole purpose of changing the language and changing the history of Romania. I've seen stuff on the History Channel showing ancient Romania. It's embarrassing if these people knew what they were saying. It's embarrassing. But the only reason I even know any of this is because I've traveled to Romania 8 times and I've established many deep relationships there. So and I've also been given access to certain things. But in any case, history has been mistold for a reason, because it's all about power. But this is sort of the esoteric links to Romania. But the way
how is it that the olive takes us there too?
Well, I just said the Mount of Olives.
Okay.
Was that the fight over the Mount of Olives is where the country of Romania was established.
Okay.
It was because of that fight. Before, and in particularly, Transylvania was a part of Hungary. So what they did is they took all the Romanian-speaking people and put them in one country. Took all the districts. Okay? So you will even see to this day a few people speak Hungarian in Transylvania, but most of them speak Romanian. So, but it was Transylvania was lock, stock, and part of the Austrian Empire, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. So in any case, all of this changed. And whether it changed, well, whatever it changed. Now that's sort of the significance of this relationship with this point of ascension of Jesus, is how this dispute over it is what caused this country of Romania to be formed. But Romania is a very special country because it's where mankind came out of. Because in the Ice Age, everybody had to retreat back to Transylvania. Transylvania in particular, which is sandwiched between the Carpathian Mountains. So it's like a plateau. And during the Ice Age, it survived. It survived. They could grow crops. They also had a network of underground tunnels, some 7,000 kilometers of underground tunnels at least, which goes to the inner earth by tradition, by legend, and by actual inspection if you can go that far.
Wow.
But anyway, so underneath in the caves, it stays 55 degrees, and there's water under there. So people could survive there if they could, even if it got a little cold for a little while above ground. But when the ice age receded, humanity emerged out of there. You see? So this is why the language, it's not just the language telling us and following the phonemes, it's going into, another thing is, academics do not understand Romanian. They don't understand it at all. In fact, but you have a Romanian, they can pick up Spanish, they can pick up Italian, they can pick up French with a little bit more challenge, and they can pick up languages. I have a Romanian friend, she can speak Chinese and Japanese. She's the one I mentioned earlier, the professor of economics, who could as well be a professor of language. Speaks about any language you give it to her, she'll figure it out. So in any case, she learned English so she could learn about time travel from my friend Dr. David Anderson, who we'll talk about next. He's the one who brought me to Romania. Now, Dr. David Anderson is a man who subscribed to my newsletter, the Montauk Pulse, because he was at that time making a time travel museum, because he had a business on Long Island, coincident to what I was doing, called the Time Travel Research Center. And he was aware, he was researching all things time travel, and he showed up one night at one of our monthly meetings. And he told me who he was, and I said, oh yes, I know who you are, because I had gotten his letter subscribing, and he had a logo, and he had, I thought at the time it was just some kid who made a logo. But no, I say he's a real person. He was really doing time travel. He wanted to work with me, he said, and he took me out to lunch, and he basically told me he had a device that could slow time down and speed it up. It was about the size of a soccer ball. And he said that he could make time speed up or make it slow down, and that they were trying to improve it. Now, he said that he wanted me to go to Romania, because he said right now in physics, people are starting to look into the spiritual component of life. He would later tell me that reading the Montauk Project book woke him up as a spiritual being. Woke him up to realize he was a spirit, because he's mostly a scientist, a very intelligent scientist, who would never, ever disclude information because it didn't meet with his prejudice, okay? So he would listen to Preston Nichols' lecture on time travel, and he wouldn't understand what Preston was saying from a scientific viewpoint, but he never discounted it, because his approach was different than Preston's. And he would not say that Preston's was not valid. It just was not what he knew. So anyway, David had just returned from Romania when he saw me. He had met me on the evening of an eclipse, and it was a Grand Cross, August 11th, 1999. And he would, he said that, he wanted to get me to Romania. Well, a lot of stuff happened in between then. And I write about it in this book, Transylvanian Sunrise, which begins with, my meeting of David Anderson, who he is, how he gets me to Romania. Now, I met him in 1999. He arranged for the funding for my first trip to Romania in 2008. It took him 9 years to get me to Romania. You see how slow some of this stuff looks or works. In the meantime, the Montauk Project had been translated into the Romanian language by a publisher, Daksha Publishing, and Sorin Hormuz. He formed his whole publishing company based upon the Montauk Project. because he was assigned to evaluate it to see whether it was suitable for publication. The company he was working for, he said yes. The owner didn't want to do it, so he formed his own publishing company, and he attracted, when he wrote this book, he attracted an author in the secret government of Romania who uses the name Radu Sinamar. Radu Sinamar is how we'd say it. And Radu Sinamar sent him a manuscript for what became this book, Transylvanian Sunrise. And he says, would you like to publish my book? Sorin said, yes, I will publish it. And they translated it into English, hoping that I would publish it. And this was about 2003 or so. It took me 4 years to read the book. It sat on the bottom of my desk. And the reason it sat on the bottom of my desk was because I'm a busy person. But I was, a friend of mine was visiting me, and I said, here, read this manuscript in your spare time while you're here. And he says, you've got to publish this. So I did read it, and I began to arrange, to negotiate, to secure the rights, because we had to work out an agreement. It took about 3 or 4 months to work out the agreement. And as soon as we worked out the agreement, I got an email from Dr. David Anderson, who had disappeared. We won't go into that. He had to discontinue his time travel research on Long Island after 9/11. There was a whole lot of drama around this. And I had visited his apartment. I was only like the second person to go there. It was on Long Island. And there was a whole bunch of high drama. But in any case, he reemerged after he gave me all of the stuff he had for the Time Travel Museum, which was mostly books, but not exclusively, and paintings. And he said, I won't be able to talk to you for 5 years.
Wow.
To the day almost, to the week. It was 5 years, and he sends me this email, and he says, how would you like to come to Romania? You can bring somebody, you get a paid trip to Romania and for a friend, and we'll give you a 3-day cultural tour of Romania. So that's sort of what this book talks about. And he invites me to a camp called Atlanticron, where he speaks for a foundation called the World Genesis Foundation, which he formed, which he was forming just as he, introduced himself to me. And he wanted me to lecture on time travel and what I had done. Now that meeting, I thought when I went to that meeting, I was going to be able to hopefully learn a lot about this book. I haven't talked about this book, which talks about holographic records underneath the Romanian Sphinx. And I think we better go in that direction so I don't confuse the audience too much. Can't hear you.
Yep, I was muted, sorry. I'm so excited about that, the story of the Romanian Sphinx. We've just got a few minutes left, so I imagine we might end up having to do another show because you're just this wealth of information in this entire chronicle series, from the Montauk Chronicles into the ones that took place in Romania. I mean, you've got such a story that you tell, and so many events and synchronicities that are linked together.
We're going to have to do another show if we're going to cover this topic, because it's so extensive and time really went by fast. Absolutely.
And everything has been fascinating. It seems like 5 minutes to me. So really great info. But go ahead and just give us a little overview of kind of what began to be unearthed in Romania. And then we'll do a part 2 and kind of go into that in detail, because it just seems like too much to try and get to.
In 2003, in August, which coincided with the famous biorhythms of August 1943 and 1983 of the Philadelphia Project and the Montauk Project, Philadelphia Experiment Project, we were all waiting to see what would happen in 2003. There was a blackout in New York extensive blackout in August 14th, predicted by Al Bielek on Coast to Coast. He said it between the 10th and the 14th is when the biorhythm is functioning. Now, the center of that biorhythm was right around Preston Nichols' property in Cairo, New York. They like to pronounce it Cairo, but it's spelled Cairo.
Interesting.
And it's named after the Egyptian identification. But in any case, where he lives to this day. But what they found in 2003, in conjunction with, it was a sort of a team of Italian Freemasons, American Freemasons who were working in the Pentagon and utilizing the Pentagon's resources and the U.S. military's resources behind the back of the U.S. president and behind the back of the Romanian president, with a secret department in Romania called Department Zero, which does in fact exist. The Americans had discovered an area underneath the Romanian Sphinx, and there's a Romanian Sphinx in the Bucegi or Bucegi Mountains. We would say Bucegi, they say Bucegi, mountains of Romania, which is more or less on the border between the province of Wallachia and Transylvania. There were a lot of Americans stationed there during this period, for no reason. What were Americans doing in Romania anyway? The two countries weren't allies. After this find underneath the Sphinx is discovered, they find a holographic chamber with holographic records, and where you can put your hand over a table and it will read out your DNA. And the closer you put your hand to the table, it reads it out microscopically. And then there's also 3 tunnels in the chamber, one of which leads to Tibet with a similar installation, with offshoots to area in Iraq near Baghdad, and an area in Mongolia. There's another tunnel which leads to Egypt beneath the Giza Plateau, and there's another tunnel which goes to the inner earth. Now, I've understood a lot more about the inner earth in Romania than over the years, but you would enjoy meeting some of my friends there for sure. If we can get you to come to Romania this next summer.
That sounds exciting.
It's an annual visit for me. It's an annual visit for me. But in any case, this chamber had a...
Peter, I want to just hold that thought. I want to just mention this. As you started talking about this stuff in Romania, there began to be an energetic reverb on your voice. And I just want to say the light around you in this video and this, I feel like there's really a major energy coming through right now. And I just want to acknowledge it and just ask you to continue, because...
Well, you'll have to evaluate the, I guess, the video phenomena, you know, because now I could show you pictures of when we get to Transylvania, you'll see these blue orbs appearing all over the place.
I'm sure.
So yes, when you talk about this stuff, does it resonate with the soul? Does it resonate? Is it true? Because a lot of these things we can't verify.
Right.
And what I get the biggest kick out of when I go to Romania, people will be so opinionated on these topics, for or against or whatever. Or whatever. It may not even be against. It'll just be, they're very opinionated on it's this way, it's not that way. And I say, how can they even have an opinion when they're not in a position to have an opinion? They're not in a position to have enough data to have an opinion. I'm not in a position to have enough data to make an opinion other than, yeah, there's something to all this. I can't say, well, it's really this way, it's really that way. But people like to get very opinionated.
So tell us a little more about the chamber under the Sphinx.
Well, it has a what's called a projection hall where you can see the future.
Yeah.
The past. Not the past, not the future, the past. Past. And it has a history of the world in holographic form. The curiosity about it is it's bioresonant. So if you look into it, you'll see a different history than I will. Now, the facts may not contradict. I don't know if they'll contradict, but they'll be different. You know, you might look at France, I might look at Italy, or vice versa, or what's going on there. because it would show you a synopsis of history, because you could only take in so much, and it's bioresonant. And that there's other devices in the other books, in the device beneath the Giza Plateau, where you can actually travel into time. But again, it's bioresonant. It's bioresonant. So there is mystery built into these books. One of the, I guess, more grounded components is I write in all of the books. I add to my experiences in Romania and in Transylvania, from journeying to the sacred sites, and just in truly incredible things have happened in my own experiences with that country. So it's been a remarkable journey. Now, right now, where I'm at in all of this research is the describing the math and physics of time travel. And in a way that if you go to the website, andersoninstitute.com, which is my friend Dr. David Anderson's website, you can see time travel laid out, but you may not understand it too well. I have come to understand it, not only through personal tutoring from him and discussions with him, but from study on my own. And I have broken it down. He was so happy with that article that you read, which is available at digitalmontauk.com, The Mathematics of Time. If you download the PDF under Mathematics of Time. He said, this is so, nobody's taken had the patience to simplify it so much. He says, I'd like to use this in universities when I go to talk. So, to hand out or whatnot. I said, sure, that's wonderful. So now I'm going to break this down even further into videos. This does not, although it explains the science and math of time travel, it does not give us access to time travel. It does not give us access to the time reactor. One of these videos will include the patent on the time reactor that he filed and then was subsequently sequestered. I also put it in one of my books called The White Bat. I didn't know I was going to be doing videos at that time, but it will also explain the time reactor. The video will explain the time reactor and that it can conceivably, pragmatically take you back in time. Now, the whole question of access becomes an issue of censorship. And when we go back to censorship, we go back to the function of the Antichrist, which is to deny you light, deny you health, deny you happiness, deny you information. This is why the word Satan means adversary. And I'm going to have a separate discussion with you about the events at Roswell and how this interfaces with the Antichrist, because there's another guest you might want to have on your show.
Right.
Concerning this, that will completely flip over the preconceived notions of of Romania, not Romania, Roswell.
Mm.
And because I would also say that people's preconceived notions of Transylvania are completely upside down, mostly by reason of this historical character named Dracula, who's been turned into a fictionally vampirized character that completely sidetracks anybody going to Romania into this castle that is not even a castle that was ever his, and it's a tourist trap, a literal tourist trap. And
I can see where misunderstood paranormal abilities would have been converted into that story, and how if there is access to Inner Earth or Agartha from there, and all this ancient history that you're talking about, that's probably a download from a really advanced civilization, that could have been misconstrued into.
I will explain. The role of Vlad Tepes, commonly known as Dracula, he played a very important role in Romanian history, and he also played a very important role in securing Romania's esoteric heritage. And how he did this was by impaling invading Turks who had enslaved Romanians and enslaved the people that were then in Romania. They weren't called Romanians. But he enslaved these people. The Ottomans, the Ottoman Empire, who was Muslim, they enslaved Christians, they enslaved Romanians, they didn't enslave anybody that wasn't on their program. So it was the Hungarians who had imprisoned Vlad. They created an alliance with him to fend off the Turks. The Hungarians were in charge of Transylvania, which is where so much of this sacred stuff is. It goes beyond the chambers beneath the Sphinx. That's not in Transylvania proper. That's in the mountains, but in the Carpathian Mountains. But in Transylvania, this area remains secured because the Turks never got into there because of the vicious punishment that Vlad the Impaler would dish out. So he was affecting the preservation of this area, which is gathering points, not only for the fellow Romanians who do consider him a national hero for protecting them, but he was also preserving the ancient heritage of the Dacian Empire in the land that we now know as Transylvania. And whether he was doing it intentionally by design is immaterial. He was doing it.
So, Peter, I'm going to just say, I think we're about out of time. This is a really exciting prelude. We're going to have to do part 2 because so much incredible history that you got in touch with in Romania. And I'd like to go into that for sure on another show soon. And I just want to say thank you so much for everything you've covered today, which really, I think it unearths an entire cosmology of history that's accessible to us today to help us understand the deeper aspects of who we are, what we can become, what's possible, that's kind of been played with through history and has also been left to us by the ancients. I mean, you're definitely tapping into, you know, something that was left with the Montauk Indians, something that was, that, you know, we've had these modern people playing with and trying to do power games with. And yet I believe within this also is access to secrets of our superhuman abilities as well, that are for the good, that are for the future of humanity. And
I agree with you. I agree with you. And the only thing I will say to add this is, as soon as you have to close this video, the conversation we'll have as soon as you shut up will become even more intriguing, because not because it's secret and I can't tell it, because we're running out of time.
Right. Awesome. I'm so excited. So let's agree to doing another show. And
Sure.
And why don't you just share one more time? I know that your books, we'll put the links under the video and on the blog post that goes with the video, but give us again access points to you and all these amazing resources and what you're just getting ready to produce on the nature of math and time travel as well.
Well, yes. The books are available at skybooks.usa.com. You can also find them on Amazon or on Kindle, also on iTunes or Nook. And the informational website is digitalmontauk.com. And then you'll have to be plugged in, you know, to when these videos come out. 5 of them have been produced, and there's about 4 or 5 more. And they'll be out. If they're not out by the time you see this, they'll be out very soon.
Awesome. Very exciting. Thank you so much. And we want to thank Naturally Better TV for being our great resource for alternative news, for information that once you turn the programming in your TV off, you keep learning and growing with a lot of the amazing presenters at Naturally Better TV. And thank you for joining us. And catch us on the next 21st Century Superhuman guest show, part 2 with Peter Moon. Thank you so much, Peter.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And we will see you soon. Much love to everyone out there.